The hall smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, touching the edges of the chairs and making them look golden. The audience was slowly trickling in, their voices soft, the hum of conversation filling the air. In the corner, a young woman adjusted her sleeves nervously. Her hands were trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. She had practiced the piano countless times in her room, alone. And yet standing here made her heart race in a way she had never felt before. She glanced at the piano sitting on the stage. Its black surface gleamed under the lights, reflecting the rows of chairs waiting to be filled. To anyone else it looked just like a normal piano, but to her it felt like a giant, demanding something from her that she wasn't sure she could give. Her teacher had told her, just play a simple tune, but those words seemed almost impossible now that so many eyes were on her. She tried to breathe deeply, reminding herself that this was what she loved. Music had always been her escape, her secret world where she could pour out every feeling she couldn't say aloud. She thought about the first time she had played on a real piano. It had been at a small family gathering, the kind where no one paid much attention to anything except the food and conversation. But when her fingers found the keys, even then there had been a spark, a small thrill that made her smile even if no one else noticed. Now, standing on this stage, the stakes felt higher. People were looking at her, and even if they weren't paying close attention yet, she knew they would soon. The thought made her stomach churn. She kept her eyes on the piano, tracing the smooth black and white keys with her fingers. They were the same keys she had practiced on for months, yet they seemed taller, wider, somehow more intimidating. She could hear footsteps behind her, and her teacher came over, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Remember," the teacher said softly, "you don't have to do anything fancy. Just let the music come from you. Play the simple tune and let it speak. That's all anyone wants." She nodded, though it didn't entirely calm her. What if she made a mistake? What if her hand slipped? The audience was growing, and now more people were seated, chatting quietly, adjusting themselves, and occasionally glancing at the stage. The young woman felt their eyes even if they weren't looking directly at her. She could almost hear the clock ticking, counting down to the moment she would have to sit and begin. She took a seat at the piano, adjusting the bench so her feet rested comfortably. Her hands hovered above the keys. They felt heavy, like they belonged to someone else. Her mind raced through the notes she had practiced, each one clear in her memory, yet when she tried to think about them all at once, it became overwhelming. She closed her eyes for a moment and tried to remember why she loved the piano, why she had spent hours alone with it. Learning the small movements of her fingers, the feel of the pedals under her feet, the way the music swelled when she pressed just right. The room grew quieter. The conversations faded as more people settled in. She could hear the soft rustle of programs and the distant creak of the floorboards. Her heart thumped loudly in her chest. She took another deep breath, trying to steady herself. The teacher gave her a small nod, signaling that it was time. She nodded back, though her hands were still shaking slightly. She placed her fingers on the keys. The first note felt strange under her fingertips, almost foreign. She pressed it, and a soft, clear sound filled the room. Her body tensed as she played the next note, but as the simple melody began, she felt a small wave of relief. It was just as she had practiced, just a simple tune, nothing fancy, nothing to impress anyone, just the music she loved. Her mind began to focus. The fear that had gripped her started to loosen. She remembered all the nights she had spent alone, learning each note, learning how to make the piano sing. She remembered the joy she felt when she could play a piece perfectly, when her hands moved without thinking, when the music became part of her. That feeling returned now, slowly, gently, like a warm light spreading inside her chest. The audience was still there, some talking quietly, some watching, some shifting in their seats. She could feel the energy in the room, but instead of letting it scare her, she let it guide her. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't think about what they would think. She only focused on the keys beneath her fingers, a simple tune she had practiced so many times. The first few measures passed. Her fingers moved with more confidence, the notes coming out clean and clear. She felt her heart slow a little as she continued. Each note seemed to settle her nerves, each chord building her courage. The room around her seemed to fade. The sunlight through the windows, the chairs, the people, they all became a blur. Leaving only the music and her, she remembered the advice of her teacher. Let the music speak. She realized that this simple tune wasn't about showing off or impressing anyone. It was about expressing something inside her that words couldn't. Every note she played was a little piece of herself, a story she was telling without speaking. And suddenly, the fear wasn't so big anymore. It became a quiet companion, reminding her that this mattered, that this moment was important, but not so heavy that it crushed her. A few people in the audience turned their heads, noticing the clear, gentle sound filling the room. Their conversations quieted. They began to pay attention, drawn in not by the complexity of the music, but by the sincerity of the sound. The young woman didn't notice. She was fully immersed, lost in the rhythm and flow. Letting the music carry her forward, she remembered the nights she had practiced in her room, playing the same notes over and over until they felt like second nature. Now, all that effort seemed to come together in this moment. Each note was exactly as it should be, each chord exactly where it belonged. She felt a spark of confidence she had never experienced before. The music was no longer just a collection of notes, it was alive, moving through her and into the room. Her fingers danced lightly over the keys, finding the gentle rise and fall of the melody. She could hear the subtle echoes in the hall, the way the sound lingered, soft and warm. A few audience members leaned forward slightly, sensing the care and emotion in each note. The young woman felt her nerves continue to melt away, replaced by a quiet joy, a sense of being exactly where she was meant to be. The first part of the tune came to an end. She hesitated for just a moment, letting the final note resonate in the room. Silence followed, a soft, expectant pause. Her breathing was steadier now. She opened her eyes slightly and saw that some people were watching her closely, their expressions curious and attentive. The fear that had gripped her was still there, a faint shadow, but it no longer held her down. She had taken the first step. It had gone better than she could have imagined. The teacher gave a small, encouraging smile from the side of the stage. That simple gesture filled her with reassurance. She knew she could continue. The simple tune wasn't just a task anymore. It was an opportunity to share herself, to speak without words. And with that thought, she prepared for the next part of the melody. Feeling the thrill of possibility, the quiet excitement that comes when someone realizes they are doing something they love. Right in front of an audience who had yet to see just how much she had to give, the young woman lifted her hands again, ready to continue. The first notes had passed, and the room had grown quiet, almost reverent. She could feel a subtle shift in the energy of the audience. The people who had been distracted were now looking toward her, curious, listening. That small change made her stomach flutter, but this time it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. She pressed the keys gently, letting the next sequence of the tune flow. Her fingers moved with a little more confidence than before. The melody was simple, as her teacher had instructed, but she found herself adding slight variations. She hadn't practiced exactly, letting her emotions guide her. Each note seemed to reach out, touching the listeners in ways she hadn't imagined. A few people leaned forward in their seats, drawn to the clarity and purity of the sound. The young woman had learned long ago that music was more than just the right keys in the right order. It was about feeling, about communicating without words. She let herself feel every note as she played, imagining each sound as a message she was sending out into the world. Her heart raced, but differently this time, steady, alive. Filled with purpose rather than panic, she noticed small details she hadn't before. The sunlight hitting the polished piano surface, the soft rustle of clothing in the audience, the faint scent of flowers mixed with the warm air of the hall. All these things became part of her performance. She wasn't just playing a tune. She was creating an atmosphere, a moment that felt alive and real. Her mind drifted to the countless hours she had spent practicing. Nights alone in her room, playing in silence, learning the subtle shifts of tone and tempo. Those hours had been quiet, lonely, but they were also full of discovery. Every mistake had taught her something. Every repetition had strengthened her. Now, all of that effort was showing itself in her playing, manifesting in the music that filled the hall. The audience began to react in small ways. A few people tapped their fingers gently on their knees, unconsciously following the rhythm. Someone tilted their head, listening more intently. Even the small details gave her a boost of confidence. She realized that even a simple tune played with care and heart could capture attention. Her fingers glided across the keys, moving with more fluidity. She had always thought she needed complex pieces to impress anyone, but now she understood that honesty in music was more powerful than complexity. She imagined each note as a small thread connecting her to the people watching. The room, once intimidating, now felt like a space where she could share herself openly. Midway through the tune, she experimented a little, adding gentle flourishes and slight pauses. The audience responded subtly, leaning in as if to catch every nuance. She felt a strange joy in that interaction, knowing that without speaking, she was communicating something important. Music had become a bridge between her inner world and theirs. Her focus was absolute. The noise around her, the rustle of programs, soft coughs, the occasional shifting of chairs faded into the background. All that remained was the piano and the sound flowing from it. Her hands, once trembling, now moved steadily. The melody rose and fell naturally, carrying emotion in every note. She thought about her teacher's words. Let it speak. It wasn't enough to simply play the right notes. She realized she had to let her feelings guide her, to put herself into the music. Fear had once held her back, but now it seemed to have dissolved, replaced by a quiet courage that made her performance authentic. Somewhere near the back, a small child watched with wide eyes, fascinated by the movement of her fingers. An older man rested his chin on his hand, clearly lost in thought. The young woman didn't notice them specifically, but she could feel their presence, their quiet attention encouraging her without a word. Every note became more intentional, more alive. She continued the melody, letting it flow naturally from one phrase to the next. Even though it was a simple tune, it had life now. Each chord seemed to breathe. Each pause felt meaningful. She felt herself smiling slightly as she played, enjoying the interaction she was creating without consciously realizing it. Her nerves were no longer a burden. They had transformed into a subtle excitement, a gentle reminder that this moment mattered. The audience seemed to respond in kind, their attention deepening as the music carried on. It was no longer about performing for them, it was about sharing something meaningful, about letting them feel what she felt through sound. The tune took her to a quieter passage. She allowed her hands to linger over certain notes, letting them resonate fully. The silence between the sounds became part of the music, adding depth and emotion. She could feel the subtle tension in the room. A collective pause, and she used it to shape the moment. Letting her control the atmosphere with subtlety, her eyes scanned the hall briefly, noticing the faces in the crowd. They weren't judging. They were listening. The young woman felt a sense of connection, unspoken bond between her and the people sitting quietly, experiencing the music alongside her. It was a revelation music. It wasn't just about skill or perfection. It was about presence. It's about being completely engaged in the act of creating sound and sharing it with others. As the middle of the tune approached, she allowed herself to explore a little more, adding soft dynamics. Playing some notes a touch louder, others more gently. The room responded. She felt the subtle shift in energy as people leaned forward, following the rise and fall of the melody. Even though the tune was simple, the emotional impact was profound. Her breathing was steady now, in rhythm with the music. She felt an awareness of herself she had never experienced before on stage. The anxiety that had gripped her in the beginning was gone. In its place was a calm determination, a feeling of flow, as if she and the piano had become one. Every note felt inevitable. Every chord felt natural. And she was free to explore the tune with creativity and feeling. The audience was fully engaged now. People who had entered the hall distracted and chatting were now silent, attentive, and curious. The young woman played without thinking about the judgment of others, focusing instead on the music itself. The energy in the room shifted subtly, filled with appreciation and anticipation as she neared the end of this part of the tune. Her fingers moved with ease, each note ringing clear and true. The sound of the piano filled the hall, warm and alive. She felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with exhilaration. She had started the performance nervously, unsure of herself, and now she was fully immersed in the music, reaching the audience without a single word. Finally, the sequence she had been playing came to a soft close. The last note lingered in the air, delicate and sustained. She allowed it to fade naturally, savoring the moment. The room was quiet for a heartbeat, a shared pause, and then she noticed a few small nods and smiles in the audience. The impact of her music was beginning to show. She felt a quiet surge of pride. The young woman exhaled slowly, lowering her hands from the keys for just a moment. The melody she had played wasn't complex or grand, but it had been hers. It had communicated something sincere, something real, and she could feel that connection forming with the listeners. The simple tune had begun to capture attention, drawing people in not with brilliance or speed, but with honesty and heart. She took a small sip of water from a bottle nearby, trying not to break her focus. Her fingers hovered again above the keys, ready to continue. The next part of the tune would build on what she had already started. But she felt confident now, aware that the audience was truly listening and that the music could guide her. The nerves of the beginning were gone, replaced by a calm determination and quiet joy in the act of creating sound that mattered. The young woman paused for a moment, her fingers still hovering over the keys, feeling the soft vibrations of the last note fading into the hall. A deep breath filled her lungs, steadying her for what was next. The first part of the tune had gone well. The audience was quiet, attentive, watching with curiosity and growing interest. But now, she felt something stirring inside her. Something beyond the notes on the page, something that wanted to come out. She pressed the next key, letting the melody flow into a new shape. It was still the simple tune her teacher had asked for. But as her hands moved, she found herself adding gentle swells and subtle pauses. Each note seemed to carry more feeling, more depth, and she realized that the music was beginning to transform in her hands. She didn't plan. It just happened naturally, as if the piano itself guided her. The audience shifted in their seats. Eyes widened slightly, heads tilted, and a few leaned forward. The soft sound that had once seemed ordinary was becoming something more alive. The young woman could feel the connection growing, though she wasn't looking directly at anyone. She was lost in the music, fully absorbed, letting every emotion she had into each note. A sense of freedom overtook her nervousness. The keys under her fingers seemed to respond to her thoughts, bending and stretching the melody in ways she had never imagined. The simple tune was no longer just a practice piece. It had become a story, a reflection of her heart and the quiet dreams she carried inside. Her body moved with the rhythm, her fingers dancing lightly, and she felt a joy she had never known in public performance. She glanced briefly at the audience. There were no words yet, just attentive faces, watching as the music unfolded. She could see a child staring wide, fascinated, a small smile tugging at their lips. An older man had his hand resting on his chin, leaning forward, completely absorbed. Even those who had seemed distracted before now sat motionless, drawn in by the unexpected beauty rising from the piano. The young woman allowed herself to explore the tune further, experimenting with dynamics, letting some notes linger and others fly lightly. She discovered that even small variations made the music feel alive, breathing with its own pulse. She smiled faintly, surprised at her own courage and creativity. The fear that had been so heavy at the start had vanished, replaced by exhilaration, by the delight of discovering what her own hands could do when guided by feeling rather than instruction. Her mind wandered briefly to the countless hours of practice in her room. Playing in silence, perfecting each movement. Those quiet nights had been lonely, sometimes frustrating, but now all that effort was paying off. The music was flowing effortlessly, richer and more expressive than she had ever imagined. Every chord, every note carried emotion, and the audience was catching it, responding with their attention and subtle reactions. The melody rose and fell, gently, then stronger, building a sense of anticipation. The young woman felt her heart swell as she realized she had control over the emotion in the room. Her music wasn't just sound. It was an atmosphere, a feeling, something that could move people without a single word. She felt a thrill run through her as she continued. Letting intuition guide her hands and heart, the room seemed to hush around her, the audience fully immersed. The faint sounds of movement, rustling programs, and whispered conversations had disappeared, leaving only the music. The young woman's body moved with ease now, confident, aware of every note and pause. She wasn't thinking about perfection or judgment anymore. She was communicating through the language she knew best. The simple tune, once plain, began to swell with unexpected emotion. She allowed herself to feel joy, longing, and even a touch of melancholy as the melody unfolded. Her hands moved fluidly, blending notes with care and intention, creating a tapestry of sound that resonated deep within the hall. Each chord seemed to speak directly to the listeners, drawing them in, connecting them to her world. She noticed small reactions in the audience. A woman's hand touched her heart, her eyes glistening. A man's foot tapped gently along with the rhythm, unconsciously following the flow. Children leaned closer, captivated by the beauty, and some adults leaned back, letting the sound wash over them. Each response gave her energy, reinforcing her belief that she could reach people through music alone. As the tune continued to transform, she became more daring. She allowed for softer, quieter passages, where the sound barely brushed the ears, and then stronger, more assertive chords that filled the space with resonance. She felt exhilarated by the contrast, by the power to shape emotion with her touch. It was as if she had discovered a hidden voice she had carried inside her for years, and it was now speaking freely through the piano. The young woman's attention narrowed to the keys and the vibrations beneath her fingers. The rest of the world faded, leaving only the music, her hands, and the subtle reactions of the audience. Her breathing matched the rhythm, steady and natural. The hall seemed to embrace the melody, the sunlight streaming through the windows, catching the edges of the notes. It's like a soft glow, a subtle smile played across her lips. She realized she had surprised herself. The tune had begun as something simple and timid, but now it had grown, flourished under her care. It was no longer just a piece she was performing. It was a living, breathing creation, a reflection of her emotions and personality, and the audience was experiencing it with her. She felt a surge of confidence as she explored the melody further. The music carried her forward, leading her hands, telling her where to go next. Her nervousness from the beginning seemed like a distant memory. The audience was captivated, leaning in, silent but attentive, their focus entirely on the unfolding story and sound. She realized that she had the power to move them, not with complexity, but with sincerity and heart. Every note was intentional now. Each pause and flourish deliberate, yet still natural and free. She could feel the energy in the room, a collective presence that seemed to respond to the music itself. The young woman was no longer performing alone. The audience and the piano were partners in the experience. She felt a deep connection, a shared understanding without words, and it filled her with warmth and excitement. She thought of her teacher's advice once more. Just play a simple tune. She smiled softly, realizing that she had done exactly that, but in her own way. She had transformed it into something extraordinary. The music had grown beyond simplicity, becoming expressive and moving, and she had done it without intending to impress or show off. It was pure, honest, and entirely her own. The audience's silence was filled with anticipation. Even though they had not applauded yet, their focus told her everything she needed to know. They were listening, captivated, waiting to see where the melody would go next. She felt a thrill, a sense of shared excitement and curiosity. As the music continued to evolve, the young woman allowed herself a deeper exploration of the tune, experimenting with slight variations in tempo and volume. The hall seemed to respond, the vibrations of the piano filling every corner, creating a sense of intimacy and connection. She could feel the subtle power of each note, the way it could touch hearts and evoke emotion without words. It was a revelation, a moment of pure joy and discovery as she neared the final measures of this section. The melody swelled slightly, growing in strength and emotion. Her fingers moved confidently, each note ringing clear and true. She felt a sense of triumph and pride, knowing that she had taken something simple and breathed life into it, creating a shared experience that touched everyone in the room. Finally, She allowed the last notes to resonate, soft and lingering. She let her hands rest gently on the keys, feeling the final vibrations echo through the hall. The audience was still, a quiet pause following the music, as if they too were savoring what had just been created. The young woman felt a deep sense of fulfillment and connection. The simple tune had become something more, something unforgettable. And she had discovered a new strength and confidence within herself. The young woman felt a new energy surge through her as she moved into the final part of the tune. The music had grown with her, taking on a life of its own, and now she could feel it pulling her forward. Her fingers moved quickly yet gracefully, each note clear and deliberate. The melody swelled, carrying a depth of emotion that even she hadn't fully expected. She was no longer just playing a simple tune. She was telling a story with every movement, every chord, every pause. The audience leaned in as the music rose, sensing the change. Their eyes widened, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The simple tune had transformed into something extraordinary. It was no longer just a performance, it was an experience, one that touched everyone present in a profound and unspoken way. The young woman felt exhilaration and fear at the same time, a thrilling combination that made her heart beat faster. She had never played like this in front of anyone. Her emotions poured into the melody, shaping it as she went. Joy, sorrow, hope, and wonder, all of it flowed through her fingers, filling the space with resonance. She felt the power of music to move people, to connect them to feelings they might not even realize they had. The audience was captivated, silent, absorbing every note, every nuance. The young woman felt a bond forming between her and the listeners, a connection that went beyond words. The tune built gradually, each measure adding a new layer of complexity, but still rooted in the simplicity of its beginnings. Her fingers danced over the keys with confidence and precision, creating a cascade of sound that seemed to carry its own heartbeat. The hall itself seemed to respond, the vibrations echoing softly against the walls, making the music feel alive. She was fully immersed now, lost in the sound and the rhythm, the emotion of the moment. She noticed small reactions in the audience, subtle yet powerful. A child's eyes glistened with wonder. An elderly woman pressed her hand to her chest, moved by the beauty of the melody. Even those who had been reserved or distracted before were leaning forward, drawn in completely. The music was reaching them, touching them, and she could feel it as a warmth spreading through the room. It was an incredible sensation, one she would never forget. Her hands moved faster now, gliding over the keys with confidence. She let herself add soft embellishments, small flourishes that felt natural and true to the emotion she was expressing. Each note had meaning, each pause mattered. The room seemed to hold its breath, the audience suspended in a moment of shared attention, waiting, feeling, connected. She realized that she had become part of the music, and that the music become part of everyone in the room. The young woman's chest rose and fell in rhythm with the melody. She had never imagined that a simple tune could carry such power, such ability to reach deep inside people. The emotions that had once been quiet, private, were now visible on the faces around her. Some were moved to tears, others smiled softly, lost in memory or feeling. And she felt the joy of knowing that she had brought all of this to them, simply by allowing herself to be honest with the music. The melody shifted again, becoming more gentle and reflective. She allowed the notes to linger, to breathe, giving the audience time to feel each sound. The silence between the notes became part of the performance, adding depth and resonance. She felt a quiet satisfaction as she played, a sense of fulfillment she had never known. Music had always been her passion, but now she understood its true power, its ability to speak directly to the heart. The room seemed to pulse with the sound, the audience entirely absorbed. She didn't look at them directly, but she could sense their presence, their engagement, their emotion. Each note she played was a small conversation, a shared feeling. The young woman felt a sense of unity with the people around her, a connection that transcended language. She was communicating with them in the purest way she knew. The music swelled, building to a climax that was both powerful and delicate. She felt her own heartbeat matching the rhythm, the energy in the hall matching the energy she poured into each note. The audience responded unconsciously, leaning in, holding their breath. feeling the rising tension and beauty of the melody. She allowed herself to be carried by the music, letting it guide her fingers, her expression, her whole body. Then, with a gentle but deliberate motion, she began the descent of the final notes. The melody softened, slowed, becoming tender and reflective. Her fingers lingered on each key just long enough to let the sound resonate fully. The audience was still, completely silent, caught in the magic of the moment. She could feel the emotional weight in the room, a collective breath held, waiting for the conclusion. Her hands moved slowly now, bringing the tune to its gentle conclusion. She played the final chords with care, letting each note linger, allowing the resonance to fill the space fully. The music seemed to hang in the air for a moment, delicate and warm, before fading into silence. She rested her hands on the keys, breathing deeply. Aware of the energy she had created and shared, the audience remained quiet for a heartbeat longer, as if savoring what had just been created. Then slowly, applause began to rise. It started softly, tentative, then grew in intensity. People clapped and cheered, some standing, some wiping tears from their eyes, some smiling broadly. The young woman felt a rush of emotion herself, a mix of relief, pride, and joy. She had faced her fear, she had played, and she had moved people deeply. She allowed herself a small smile, her heart full. The experience had been transformative, both for her and for the audience. She realized that music could carry emotion in a way words never could, that a simple tune played with honesty and heart could become something extraordinary. The applause continued, echoing through the hall. But she felt a quiet inner satisfaction that was even more powerful. People approached her after the performance, expressing admiration and gratitude. They spoke of the beauty, the emotion, the sincerity they had felt. She listened, smiling, feeling proud but humble, understanding that the music itself had done the talking. She had simply given it permission to speak, and it had reached hearts in ways she could hardly describe. The young woman left the stage eventually, still feeling the warmth and excitement of the performance. She knew that this moment would stay with her forever, a memory of courage, creativity, and connection. She had been told to play a simple tune, but she had given the audience so much more. She had shared herself, her heart, and the magic of music, leaving everyone clapping and cheering, touched in ways that went beyond mere notes on a page. The applause came in waves, filling the hall with a sound that was almost overwhelming. The young woman still sat at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, trying to process the moment. The audience was clapping, cheering, some even standing, their faces glowing with admiration and joy. She had never imagined that a simple tune could elicit such a reaction. Her heart raced, a mixture of excitement, pride, and relief washing over her. As the clapping continued, she finally allowed herself to smile fully. It wasn't just the noise of applause, it was the recognition, the connection she had made with the people in the room. Every note she had played, every subtle pause, every flourish had reached them, touched them, and now they were showing her how much it mattered. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a deep satisfaction that went beyond any words she could have spoken. People began to approach her, one by one, offering compliments and congratulations. A woman spoke softly, eyes glistening, saying, "That was beautiful. I haven't felt something like that in a long time." A man nodded, shaking his head in amazement. "You made such a simple piece feel so alive." It was incredible. Children crowded near, shyly smiling, some clapping their hands with delight. The young woman listened, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had shared herself through music. The response was overwhelming. Her teacher came forward, eyes shining, a proud smile on their face. "I knew you could do it," they said quietly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You didn't just play a tune, you spoke through it. You let the music show who you are." The young woman nodded, still catching her breath, realizing that the lesson had gone far beyond the notes. It was about courage, expression, and connection. She had discovered something new about herself. The hall slowly began to settle. People continued talking softly, exchanging their impressions of the performance. Some were still wide-eyed, replaying the melody in their minds, while others lingered near the piano, drawn to its presence and the person who had transformed it into a story. The young woman looked at the keys, now calm and silent, and felt a quiet sense of awe. She had started the evening with nervousness, unsure of herself, and now she felt a sense of accomplishment that went deep into her soul. She thought back to the first time she had been told to play a simple tune. How small and ordinary it had seemed at the time, almost mundane, and yet in that simplicity, she had found a way to express everything she felt. She realized that sometimes the greatest power comes not from complexity or technical skill alone, but from honesty and heart. She had poured herself into each note, and the audience had felt it. People continued to approach her, some asking how she had learned to play with such feeling, others simply sharing how much they had enjoyed it. She listened to each person, smiling, nodding, feeling the ripple effect of her music. She had expected nerves and perhaps polite applause, but she had received something far richer: connection, emotion. In a shared experience that would stay with everyone present, her thoughts drifted to the quiet moments before she had played, the anxiety she had felt, the doubts running through her mind, and she realized how far she had come in such a short time. The fear had been transformed into courage, and that courage had allowed her to create something extraordinary. She understood now that every performance was not just about playing the right notes. It was about giving a part of herself to the music and, through it, to the audience. She noticed a few audience members lingering near the stage. Reluctant to leave, they were discussing the nuances of the performance, the subtle shifts in tempo and dynamics, the emotional depth she had brought to a simple tune. She felt a quiet pride, not in her technical ability, but in the impact she had made. Music had allowed her to speak without words, to share herself in the most profound way. The young woman took a deep breath, feeling the calm settle over her. The applause had faded into gentle murmurs, and the hall was now filled with soft conversation and laughter. She realized that she had not only performed, but had also created a memory for everyone in the room. They would carry the experience with them, perhaps reflecting on it later. Thinking about the way a simple tune could become something extraordinary, she allowed herself to reflect quietly. Thinking about the journey that had led her here, the countless hours of practice, the quiet nights alone, the determination to improve, and the willingness to face her fear. It had all come together in this moment, and the result was beyond anything she could have imagined. She felt gratitude for the opportunity for the music. For the audience who had received her gift so openly, her teacher placed a gentle hand on her back once more, guiding her as she stood up from the piano. The young woman felt the weight of the moment, the significance of what had just happened. She had played a simple tune, but she had given everyone in the hall something unforgettable. She had learned that the true beauty of music lies not only in the notes themselves, but in the emotion and sincerity behind them. As she walked through the hall toward the exit, she could still hear fragments of conversation, people expressing how moved they had been. She smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had discovered something about herself and about music, the ability to touch hearts, to move people, and to create a shared experience that was both personal and universal. The young woman stepped outside, into the cool evening air, the warmth of the hall and the applause still lingering in her heart. She looked up at the sky, feeling a sense of peace and accomplishment. The journey had been challenging, filled with uncertainty and nervousness, but it had led to something beautiful. She knew that this was only the beginning of her path. That music would continue to guide her, inspire her, and allow her to connect with others in ways words never could. She walked slowly, savoring the moment, feeling the joy and the freedom that came from embracing her talent and sharing it with others. The applause, the cheers, the smiles, they would stay with her forever. A reminder of the power of courage, simplicity, and heart. She had taken a simple tune, and through honesty and emotion, turned it into an unforgettable experience, leaving everyone clapping and cheering. Filled with the magic of music, after the applause faded, the young woman found herself alone backstage for a moment. The quiet was almost strange after the energy of the hall, and she took a deep breath, feeling both relief and a lingering excitement. She ran her fingers lightly over the piano keys once more, remembering how they had guided her through the performance. Every note she had played, every nuance, felt like a part of her she had finally shared with the world. As she sat there, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It wasn't just the hours of practice or the technical skills she had developed, it was the patience, the courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable. Vulnerability had allowed the music to speak in ways she could never have forced. She had allowed herself to be open, and in doing so, she had touched the hearts of everyone in the audience. The memories of the audience's reactions filled her mind, the wide eyes, the quiet leaning forward, the soft smiles, the occasional tear. She had not expected to see such genuine responses, yet there they were. Each person had received the music in their own way, interpreting it through their own emotions, and she had been the bridge. That realization made her chest swell with warmth. She had given them something beyond a simple tune. She had given them a shared experience, a moment to remember. She thought of her teacher, who had guided her with simple words, "Just play a simple tune." At first, those words had seemed small, almost dismissive, but she now understood their true power. Simplicity could be a vessel for depth. It could allow the player to focus on emotion rather than showiness, to create connection rather than simply display skill. She realized that the beauty of music often lies in its honesty and clarity, not its complexity. The young woman rose from the piano and walked slowly toward the dressing room. The hall was nearly empty now. She could hear only the distant echoes of laughter and conversation from the lingering audience. The echo of her own music seemed to follow her, a gentle reminder of what she had accomplished. She felt proud, not just for the performance, but for the way she had trusted herself and allowed the music to guide her, sitting by the window of the dressing room. She watched as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street. The quiet beauty of the evening mirrored the quiet satisfaction she felt inside. It had been more than just a performance, it had been a journey of self-discovery, a step into the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've given your best and connected authentically with others.